Good afternoon and welcome to the City Council meeting for the City of International Falls for Monday, November the 5th, 2018. I would ask all present to please arise and pledge allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're going to miss me after that.
Thank you. I would ask the City Administrator to note the roll call with Councillor Droba absent on a family vacation. Move to the agenda, and we have some additions to the agenda under new business. Item number 2, approving delinquent water and sewer accounts to the County Auditor Treasurer. Item number 3, approving delinquent grass and blight invoices to the County Auditor. Item number 4, directing the City Attorney to seek court order for payment of water and sewer charges and blight cleanup. And then item number 9, a resolution approving increase in fees for the ambulance services. Council's pleasure with the agenda and or the additions. Motion by Councillor Briggs to approve the agenda with the additions.
I'll second.
Second by Councillor Kraus. Discussion on the motion or the agenda.
I have just a point of information. On number 9, that does not have to be an ordinance now? Did you find that out?
I haven't confirmed it with them.
Okay.
We're looking downstairs right now.
Further questions or discussion with regard to the motion or the agenda? Hearing none, question.
Aye.
Aye.
I would vote yes, and the motion would carry, and the agenda is approved with the additions. Thank you. Move to the minutes of the regular City Council meeting of October the 15th, 2018.
Move to approve, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jackson, motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second by Councillor Kraus. Discussion on the motion or the minutes? Hearing none, question?
Aye.
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Minutes for October 15 regular City Council meeting are approved. And then we have item number 2 under the approval of minutes, and that's the public information meeting on the local option sales and use tax. Motion by Councillor Briggs to approve those minutes.
Second.
Second by Councillor Kraus. Discussion also on the motion or the minutes?
There was one comment that didn't get in here, which was mine. I reiterated at that meeting that when Representative Eklund was here, he said that if we approve the sales tax, it would make it easier to get a bond issue from the state. That in there, I didn't...
Point of order, that would have been the October 8th meeting. He wasn't here on the 23rd.
I know, but I said it about him on the 23rd. I did.
I don't remember that.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I did.
Okay.
So I'd like to see that entered into the minutes.
Okay.
And a bond issue from the state, just a point of clarification here as well, would be paid by the state, so it wouldn't be additional burden to the city taxpayers. Another good, point of...
Okay, we would add to the minutes that of the local sales and use tax meeting on October the 23rd, that Councillor Jackson noted that the state representative stated that the ability to seek bonding and be favorable would be enhanced by having had a local sales and use tax. further discussion with regard to the minutes? None. Question?
Aye.
Aye.
And I would vote yes. Motion is carried with the addition and approval of the minutes. Thank you. And then we have the, and we just received those today, the minutes of the October 31st Committee of the Whole meeting with the consultant Mike Metro on the ambulance operation. Everyone have a copy of those?
Yeah. I would move to approve the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Motion by Councilor Jacksaw to approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole Council on October 31st. Councilor Briggs and Councilor Kraus were both absent, so I would second the motion having been present. Discussion with regard to those minutes.
I just want...
Committee of the Whole meeting, please.
I just want to say that the Mike Metro meeting was very productive and came up with some very good recommendations to resolve some of the issues that we have in the ambulance department. And so it was Chief Manassa that recommended Mike Metro. So thank you, Chief. I think you found a very valuable resource to move us forward. I really appreciate that. And then I'd like to thank Brian and myself for recommending to the council, right? So, but anyway, it was a very
productive
meeting. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
please.
Could I add that I had a scheduling conflict?
Yes.
That I could not attend the meeting. Could that be noted somewhere that it was?
You were out of town.
I was out of town at a training that I could not get out of. I just wanted to make sure that was noted, that I didn't skip it, but had a conflict.
Okay, we would add that note. Other discussion or questions with regard to the minutes of the October 31 meeting of the Committee of the Whole? Hearing none, question?
Aye.
Aye.
I vote yes, motion is carried, minutes are approved. Thank you. Move to the resolution on the payment of claims and transfers.
So moved.
Motion by Councilor Jacksaw to approve the resolution.
Second.
Second by Councilor Briggs. The transfers include to the general fund from the lodging and tax fund, $614.36. Accounts payable claims for the City of International Falls of $225,215.49. Airport commission claims of $159,836.82. Airport Commission Terminal Project Phase 1 claims of $10,959.57. Airport Commission Terminal Project Phase 2 claims of $693,214.22. Runway reconstruction projects at the airport, Phase 1 claims of $116,102.38, and Phase 2 claims for the runway reconstruction project of $87,490. We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution approving the transfers and claims. Discussion. None. Question.
Aye.
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 And I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Resolution is adopted, and the transfers and the payment of claims are approved. Thank you. If anyone in the audience has something to bring to the attention of the City Council.
Here.
Thank you.
Who I am.
Yes,
Okay,
please. If
Nancy
you
Imhoff.
state your name and like to limit the presentation to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Nancy Imhoff, business downtown International Falls. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I just wanted to touch base again on the blight issue that we talked about the last couple times. I realize that the timing isn't great with new council people coming in, probably in winter coming. I guess what I'd like to ask is just a commitment from the mayor and the council members that will still be on, and maybe new council members in the audience, that come early spring, we can be ready to go with some sort of cleanup of the city, a real joint effort, whether it's grassroots citizens plus whatever resources the city has, just so that we don't have a whole summer of things looking the way they have been. I'm mostly interested in the Highway 53 corridor is my interest, but I know there's residential areas that need attention too. I've been doing some research on some ordinances. I've found a couple things that I don't know if is it Ken that's rewriting or Steve or
We're having them rewritten by a consultant at the present time.
There's just a couple interesting things that to me would encompass some of the things that we talked about on the specific things on Highway 53. One of which was, I noticed several cities state that as to vehicles parked on property, whether they be advertised for sale or whatever, that most of them don't allow them being parked on lawn, that it has to be a paved surface because of gasoline and fuel hazards. So that would be something that might be of interest to put in a new ordinance so that, you know, when people are selling things for sale, it can't be just plopped anywhere in the city. Another thing that I saw also when we're talking about building materials and whatnot, that most of the time they can't be unsightly. They have to be a certain distance from a sidewalk. That was interesting to me. There's the grass, which I think our ordinance already covers, the 6 inches within 7 days or whatever. So like the specific things that I talked about, I feel could be easily covered, or, you know, I'm hoping the ordinance is redone by like maybe March 1st or something, so come spring we can get going on things. I understand that it's a lot of work for 2 people, you know, to keep track of this. I don't know if there's something that could be done as to, even with mowing of properties or whatnot, if there was a volunteer group. The other thing somebody mentioned to me was perhaps, you know, like maybe we could form like a little group or something. There's something here called neighborhood standards in City of Rockford. So they just go by these neighborhood standards. If we just named it something, I was thinking some of the high school kids, especially the ones that are juniors and seniors, and they need hours for volunteer work when they're applying for scholarships and whatnot, you know, maybe sometimes they could mow certain areas. And I'm not saying this to, I think property owners, if you can own a piece of property, you should be able to own a lawnmower. So it's not meant just to let people out of taking care of their own spots. I think that we need as a city to reinforce those stronger. But if there's issues with an illness or somebody needs some help or something, that might be some way of doing it. And just walking, and again, that corridor there, if there's weeds that need to be sprayed and sidewalk cracks or something like that. I mean, I just think there's lots of solutions out there. I just want to see an effort made to get going on this. You know, like I say, it's winter coming, so there's not a lot to do, but there are some places where some properties could be moved, or not properties, but items, whether it's construction materials, vehicles, whatever. You know, that'd be nice if some of that got done before winter really set in. But I'm just asking that as a city, whether it's citizens and government combined, to just make a commitment come early spring that we could get moving on cleaning up some of this, especially the Highway 53, so that we have a summer of cleaning that Highway 53 corridor up before the construction and whatnot starts in 2020. If we can at least get, some of it's just real minor, you know, it can be done. There's no doubt in my mind. So I just wanted to reiterate on that, and, you know, just kind of.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
I just want to thank you, Nancy, for your commitment to bettering the city, and I know Gary feels the same way. And we do have a building and housing committee that does do the citywide cleanup, and we haven't met for a while. I'm going to convene that meeting, even though I'm leaving the council. I'll be convening that meeting, and I hope to remain on that committee. And we will be, you know, working on how to improve the city over the course of the winter months. I think Gary agreed to serve, so welcome. And we've been rather inactive except for the citywide cleanup. One of our original goals was to, once the housing study was complete, and it's going to be at the end of this month, we'll have the final version. Then the committee can meet and work on grants and projects or propose them to the city council. It does take it does take woman hours. It takes people hours to research and put a plan together. And so I envision that this committee could do that. That was our original purpose. But I think that we can take the idea, especially with the passion that I see here, we can take some of you have excellent ideas, incorporate those into our work plan. And so I haven't called a meeting because it's the silly season, and I've been door knocking.
It's not the best timing.
Yeah.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah. But right after the election, I can take a look at calling.
Maybe I can show you some of the stuff I've looked at too, as I just kind of Googled city ordinances, you know, for blight and whatnot, and it was kind of interesting. I read our ordinance, and we're not that far off, but there were a couple specific things like vehicles not being parked on lawns, which I thought was an interesting one because that would eliminate some of the problems, and just the materials being stored.
I heard enough.
They're not visible.
When I'm door knocking, I always hear that, you know, complaints about blight and violations. One of Councilor Droba's ideas was to have an ordinance officer. It's trouble, the city budget is so tight, but I think maybe that deserves some exploration too.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, because then you can be methodical rather than just running on complaint-driven issues. So.
And perhaps, you know, with fines and whatnot, you know, some of these people are given misdemeanors. I've read that, and I don't know. Maybe fines need to be per incident, not just a one-time thing. But I understand it has to be relative to the offense and whatnot, because I understand when there's a family that's having a hard time, and that's why I'm like some sort of volunteer group or whatever might be a good idea too. But just pure laziness and irresponsibility, I think that the standards have just dropped in the town, sadly, for upkeep of property, and I'd like to, maybe if people see all of us citizens or some of us that want to help doing that, it might inspire them just to take care of their own, and that would be, you know, a real good solution.
I'd like to share that in many of the cases this past summer where we had blight issues or lawn mowing, that and if you read further on the ordinance towards the end, it says that an administrative fine or fee can be charged to $150.
$50, yeah.
And that has been done in a number of cases this past year. And some of those will be certified to the county auditor tonight because this is the time of year that we certify those costs that folks haven't come in and paid. Some came in and paid their cleanup and costs, and so but some haven't. And so we will be putting that against the properties. And
good.
further, I guess, Councilor Kraus, please.
You know, the new council will be seated in January, and in between our regular Monday meetings, we have a committee of the whole meeting. And that on that middle Monday, it's during the day. I feel that once we get the new council seated, this would be a very good topic to talk about because we can spend more time talking about it at one of those meetings. And I realize that that's January, but when you think about it, we've only got 3 more council meetings before we seat the new council. So that would, the election's tomorrow, we'll have an idea. You can certainly reach out to the candidates that win tomorrow, but then I'm thinking that first meeting in January, that middle Monday, whatever it would be, that would be a good spot where we could hit this because you would have the new council at that point.
Right.
And then we could maybe look towards a resolution to see what kind of everybody's thoughts are.
I think that would be perfect.
If that makes sense.
But there's not that much you can do right now anyway with the weather turning towards
Right.
winter. So
But that would still give us time to...
for spring, between then and spring. Yeah.
Yeah, and we could have a more in-depth conversation, and if you could share some of that information or maybe get it to Ken and he can share that with us.
I would be happy to, yeah.
We've got a, kind of an idea of where you're coming from, and we can certainly have a conversation before we move forward.
And I don't want to imply in any means that people aren't doing their jobs. I know there just seems to be an overwhelming amount of it. It's just, I don't know. I don't know why people out there just seem to be not as caring or as responsible as they were maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So I think it's just crept up to be more of a problem than what maybe it's been in the past. But like I just want to reiterate, the Highway 53, a little bit more of the commercial area is really important because when people are coming into our town, it's not the impression I don't think any of us want to give. So
Just ask one question of the city attorney or the city administrator with regard to if the city is citing someone for a blighted issue or grass is too long or something, would we be allowed to have volunteers go in and work on those, or do we need someone who's been, I guess, hired by the city to do that?
Well, I think right now under our current ordinance, it says the city will take care, we have the right to go in there. I don't think we're required to necessarily hire somebody. If there were a volunteer group that would mow the grass,
and the city approved of it.
we could do that if we designated those individuals as rather than somebody we're hiring to do it. Regards to removal of property or those kinds of things, then that becomes more complicated.
There's a scope to beautifying the city that we touched on earlier in other meetings with Couchiching County Men's Garden Club. And so there's people falling. The volunteer force is aging. And so we need to come up with
I think getting young people involved would be wonderful. Yeah. And I mean, I know how I feel when I mow my lawn and it looks so great for a little while. It's like for young people, that might be a really awesome experience for them, and for them to see later that, gee, I helped fix this little area up, or I've helped with that, make it look real nice, and might instill some pride that they didn't have before as well. So, I think that's worth exploring. And like I say, I think it's these kids that are looking for scholarships and applying for colleges. Sometimes it's hard to put down your volunteer hours like what you did. Highway cleanup is one usually, I think, that they use. But like if we called it something like beautiful, or I don't know, clean up I Falls or something, and they could put on a resume or something, I participated in or I assisted in this the summer of. It's just a thought.
Well, the world has always improved and changed by a handful. It takes just a handful of committed people. That's all it takes. I think we can do this.
That's why I'm back again this week.
Thank you.
But I'm good now. Thank you.
Anyone else that wishes to approach the council at this time? Another opportunity at the close of the meeting for audience participation. Thank you. We'll move to the consent agenda. We have 4 items under the consent agenda. Approve the travel and training expenses for the city administrator to attend the Institute for Building Officials training on January 15 in Brooklyn Center. Item 2 is to approve the travel and training expenses for Nathan Myers, paramedic, to attend the ICS 300 and MGT 347 courses in St. Louis County Emergency Management in Duluth, December 11th through the 13th. Item 3 is to approve travel and training for paramedic Zach Schofield to attend the Fire Instructor 1 and Fire Officer 1 training online and skills in Camp Ripley on December 14th and 15th. And then we have approval of a number of license renewals. They would be Fun Food Factory, an itinerant restaurant license, Jeff Briggs Construction, a snowplow license, Jim's Disposal Service, a garbage hauler license, Kutaska Community Action Frostbite Phones Thrift Store, a secondhand dealer with local business, Leon's Snow and Grass snowplow license, Mr. Faith Sound and Light Incorporated, dance permit license and theater license, Pizza Barn, a restaurant license, Subway restaurant license, the Yoga Bear, a massage individual license. So those are the consent agenda items. Council's pleasure with that. Motion by Councilor Briggs to approve the consent agenda. Second by Councilor Kraus. Being no discussion, question?
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Consent agenda is approved. Thank you. We'll move to new business. Item number 1 is to request approval of the year 2019 license renewals that include tobacco and liquor applications. I don't know if the council wants to handle the liquor and tobacco licenses each separately, or if you want to do them all as one.
All is one.
Chief, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review the licenses, if there's any concern on the part of any of the licenses that are presented with tobacco and alcohol.
I've reviewed them, there's no issues, sir.
Very good. Motion by Councilor Jacksaw to approve the 2019 license renewals that may include tobacco and liquor applications.
Second.
Second by Councilor Briggs. I'm going to read those for the record. Bootleggers Fuel and Liquor, a cigarette license, gasoline pump license, and restaurant license. Bootleggers LLC, off-sale liquor license. Citizens for Bacchus AB, restaurant, wine on sale, and 3-2 sale, restaurant and bar license. Dollar General Store, number 15619, a cigarette license. Family Dollar Store, number 30058, a cigarette license. Forest Land Sales and Service, cigarette and gasoline pump license. Holiday Station Store, number 380, a 3-2 off-sale license, cigarette, gasoline pumps, and restaurant license. Kmart Store, number 9689, fireworks license and restaurant license. Randy's Tire and Auto Repair, cigarette and gasoline pumps license. Super One, cigarette license and restaurant license. And the Jug Liquor, cigarette license and off-sale liquor license. Those are the licenses that would be approved by this motion that has been made by Councilor Jackson and seconded by Councilor Briggs. Discussion with regard to the motion or any of the licenses? Hearing none, question?
Aye.
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried and licenses are approved. Thank you. Move to the item number 2, and that's the approval of the delinquent water and sewer accounts to be certified to the county auditor treasurer. And the total of those with the interest, 8% interest charge, is $10,718.23. Council's pleasure with the resolution to approve those delinquent water and sewer accounts. Motion by Councilor Kraus.
Second.
Second by Councilor Jacksaw. Discussion on the motion or the resolution? Hearing none, question?
Aye.
Yes, motion is carried. Resolution is adopted approving the delinquent water and sewer accounts to be certified to the county auditor. Item number 3 under new business is the resolution approving the delinquent grass and blight invoices to be certified to the county auditor.
So moved.
Motion by Councillor Jackson,
Second?
second by Councillor Briggs. Question on the motion or the resolution? And the total on those with the 8% interest charge is $13,982.76. Further questions or discussion? Hearing none, question.
Aye.
I vote yes, motion is carried. Resolution is adopted approving the delinquent grass and blight invoices to be certified to the county auditor. Thank you. Item number 4 under new business is the resolution directing the city attorney to seek a court order for payment of water and sewer charges and blight cleanup. Pleasure with that resolution.
Mayor, I'll move it.
Motion by Councillor Jackson,
I will second.
second by Councillor Kraus. Adopt the resolution. Attorney, any questions with regard to
Well, the
resolution or?
the comment I would make is that this would only make sense against those individuals who we would have some reasonable possibility of collecting after we've got the judgment. I mean, otherwise we're going to be spending court costs and attorney's fees to get the judgment, and a lot of times these judgments aren't worth the paper they're written on because you're never going to get any. So what I would ask is that the council give me discretion to proceed only against those individuals that I think there's a reasonable chance of recovery. Otherwise we're throwing good money after bad. Some of these names on here, I haven't researched it, but I'm almost certain we wouldn't recover anything because of their circumstances. And so I understand the thinking, but unless there's somebody, unless they have some assets or they're working or something else, but if if they're an elderly individual and not having any income, we're just, there's literally, the judgment books at the courthouse are filled with hundreds of names of people that owe monies that can't be collected. And so I would ask the council to give me the discretion to determine which ones we will proceed against, and I can work with the city administrator on going through those, and he and I together could decide which ones to move forward on and which ones not to waste our money on.
Please.
Mr. Anderson. Is that doable?
Yes, it is, as a matter of fact. We can individual facts for each of these cases and on a discretionary basis if that.
Thank you.
Point of order.
Yes.
Do we need to revise the resolution? I don't think so.
I would think that if the maker of the motion would include that the city attorney and the city administrator have the discretion on those items that can be collected, I would accept that.
I'll add that to my motion.
Okay, and second by Councillor Kraus. You second. The city administrator, you would note that as part of the motion that the city attorney and the city administrator would have the discretion to determine those that they would want to seek funds from, if at all possible.
We will have.
All right, further questions or discussion? Hearing none, question.
Aye.
And I would vote yes, and the resolution is approved with the addition of discretion to the city attorney and city administrator. Thank you. Item number 5 under new business is a resolution authorizing to execute the Minnesota Department of Transportation Grant Agreement number 1032719, the state project number A3601-109 for airport improvements, excluding land acquisition for construction of the runway, Phase 1. Your pleasure with the resolution approving that contract. Motion by Councilor Briggs. Second by Councilor Jackson. And you'll note on the page with regard to the agreement that the local share would be $164,742 between the city, yes, divided between the city and the county.
Is that point, can I ask a?
Please.
All right. Was that included in the 2018 budget?
Yes.
Okay.
2019 budget.
2019, okay. So,
It'll be done next year.
okay.
This is Phase 1 of the runway reconstruction.
Okay, so we budgeted for this.
That's scheduled between June and August of next year.
Just so we budgeted. Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Kraus.
for clarification, so we're getting close to $6.3 million worth of improvements for $165,000?
Yes.
It's a steal of a deal.
Yes, and please note that the state has already included what they're going to pay in there also, which is $176,000. The feds are going to pay almost $6 million on that first phase.
That's a pretty good deal.
It's got to be very close to 97 or 98%
Yeah, it would be.
of the project.
Yeah.
Besides that, you can't have an airport without a runway.
Further questions or discussion with regard to the resolution? Question?
Aye.
And I would vote yes, motion is carried, resolution is adopted, and the grant agreement is approved. Thank you. Item number 6 under new business is to approve the resolution accepting the transfer of the International Falls Economic Development Authority Fund 208 money to the Capital Outlay 402 Fund with the Fire Department for a 5-year repayment. And that would be in the purchase of the 75-foot used ladder truck. Council's pleasure with that resolution. Motion by Councilor Kraus.
Second.
Second by Councilor Briggs. Discussion on the motion or the resolution?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Jackson.
Number one, the IFEDA, as we move forward with the housing study and the comprehensive land use plan, there is going to be a need for funds. And I don't really think depleting that fund for a core function of the city, which is providing fire service, fits very well. Furthermore, this is just a delay of recognizing where the money's really coming from, because ultimately, in order for the fire department to pay back the IFEDA, the general fund is going to have to increase their budget. So ultimately, the money's coming from the general fund anyway. So why are we moving this to, why are we got this intermediary piece of bookkeeping that we're doing?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to come up with the full amount, and in order to stay within the 50% that we want to have at the end of the year for the general fund, which is a requirement that we've discussed here many times, that we'd like to have that amount of money on hand. Secondly, it doesn't necessarily mean that we would increase the funds to the fire department, because they are spending money, capital money, every year, and it's part of their budget. And so we would be taking that capital monies that they would expend each year and making the payment back to the International Falls EDA.
The fire department is funded by the general fund.
Correct.
Yeah. So whatever, if unless they cut their capital budget for future expenditures to cover this expenditure, we're going to end up increasing the fire department budget. I don't see how it can be done any other way. Secondly, I don't know how close we are to 50%. I thought we had a bigger cushion than that. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised after all my dire predictions a year ago that our general fund balance was a couple $100,000 more than I predicted. So I'm not too convinced that that's a valid situation right now. And thirdly, even if it was, we can always reduce it to 40%.
We can.
So I just think this is extra bookkeeping. It really doesn't add anything to transparency or clarity. And I think, and the IFEDA's function is for economic development. I say that we're going to come up short of funds when we try to implement, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on studies. We need money to implement them. That's really important.
We didn't spend hundreds of thousands on the housing study.
No,
it was
but we
30,000
on Voyage Forward. We spent what, 250? Yeah,
200,000. Yes.
So I'm of the mindset that studies are a waste of money unless you follow up with an action plan, and you can have all the planning and all the goodwill in the world, but it still takes bucks too. So I'm not going to vote for this because I think it should come out of the general fund.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Kraus, please.
Has this been figured into future budgets, including the submitted budget for 2019?
Yes. City Administrator.
Will the budget be increase it? Will the ask increase in 2020, 2021, 2022 because of this, or will it
for the fire department
maintain? Will there be I mean, it's going to go up every year, but is it going to go up a large increment, or is it going to be to cover it? I guess.
Mayor, Council, with the motion that was approved by the EDA, which is to provide the $225,000 to the city, and then would be payable up to a 5-year period, interest-free. We're anticipating that $45,000 a year for a 5-year period would be included in the budget from the general fund, or to reimburse the fire truck.
But will their budget be going up $45,000 a year to cover it?
Yes.
Ultimately, the money's coming from the general fund.
It's an interim transfer of funds from a source of money that of the EDA isn't anticipated to be expended all at once, and so and again it would be up to 5 years, and we're anticipating all 5 years at $45,000 a year. Already made a down payment on the ladder truck, and it's a 75-foot ladder truck that's currently in service by the city of Egan. Vendor has rebuilt a new ambulance for the city of Egan, and so within the next that vehicle will have International Falls signage on it and be delivered to $1,000 in the 2019 fire department budget to pay it back. And just to council's memory, when we talked about the preliminary budget back in September, I think the council's intention was $1,000 out of the general fund and $100,000 down to balance the 2019 budget. So we need to make from the requested money. We'll be reducing the general fund budget by $1,000.
Do we know what the projected general fund balance is for the end of the year yet?
I do not have the precise. Last year we were not that much over the 50% that you've been.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, it's hard to even have this discussion unless you know what we're coming in at. But the point is, first of all, I don't think it's good practice to fund core city functions like the police department, the fire department, administration, with IFEDA's funds, which is a separate entity, legal entity, which, whose mission is for economic development and community improvement. So I don't like the practice of funding a fire truck that way. I think that what we could do instead, would be to restrict the general fund for the amount that we're taking out of there to write the check. I mean, it's all one big checking account anyway. This is just an accounting device to keep track of the money that the fire department has been advanced. Because the fire department is actually part of the general fund. It isn't its own fund.
Well, I stand to be corrected, but I believe that the funds that are in the EDA 208 fund came from the general fund. I believe they were transferred previously. So,
well, that's an entirely different question. Yes, it's not.
It was general fund money that was moved over to the EDA, and certainly can be moved back for use in general fund purposes. Please.
As much as I agree with Councillor Jacksaw, this needs to be paid for, and if this is the way, this is the way. But I think moving forward, I think it's better practice to not borrow.
It seems to me the discussion got to this point because we needed to get this truck. And rather than take a big hit on the general fund, in committee we made the decision to do it this way because it's going to get paid back to the EDA anyway.
Yes, EDA.
But it was a hit or miss on getting this truck at a really good deal because a brand new truck would have been, what, twice as much as this one?
About $1 million.
Yes. So we didn't want to miss out on this deal, and we made the decision, hey, we can take it out of there because you're going to pay it back anyway. Not be able to deplete the general fund and go under the 50%. So.
Councillor Jackson.
It isn't a question of having money to make. We're going to buy. We've already committed to buy the truck, the truck, and so we're going to write a check out of the general fund. And even if we didn't take it out of the separate checking account at Bremer that is the IFEDA fund balance, then we would. It isn't like we only. It isn't like we don't have millions of dollars sitting in the general fund in actual checking account cash, right? Don't we? Yeah. So it's that's not the question here.
Councillor Kraus.
Could it be amended that if we move forward with this, we vote on it, if it passes, could it be amended that if there are funds that we could put them back sooner? If a proper accounting if it's reasonable and prudent to do so, would we be able to put it back sooner than
we had a need out of EDA?
And I do have one more question. This question is for you, Chief Manassa. Will this truck be able to reach everything so we don't have to borrow Fort Francis's anymore? Is this going to fulfill our needs?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the present ladder truck is a 50-foot, and it's a 1982 model, which is over 30 years old, and the insurance companies are not pleased that we have vehicles of that age.
Just on my own observations, I've seen, twice I've seen that Fort Francis truck over. I think the last one was the Ace Hardware fire. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so we'll have our own?
Yes.
Okay.
The question of purchasing the truck is not the question before us. That's a good thing we're doing. The question is how to account for it.
Accounted for.
Not appropriately if you take it out of the IFEDA, but okay. I'm just going to vote no.
It's a matter of opinion.
Yes, go ahead.
City Administrator, please.
Mr. Mayor, just to offer my own opinion, is I have a tendency to agree with Councilor Jacksaw's priorities for the EDA fund and having economic development authority monies, because it's an important aspect to what we as a city council have been trying to do, and as a city moving forward to try and promote economic development in the community and have future growth and increase in the tax base. But having said that, I think that this is can be viewed as a strategic move trying to address what some of our future cash flow needs are going to be going into 2020, where we've talked about the need for $1 million to $1 million local share of funds to try and do the Highway 53 improvement project, as well as the subsequent, we've made through the resolution with MnDOT appropriating monies for the phase 1 of the airport runway reconstruction project, but there'll be phase 2, 4, which will have higher local shares that using these monies now will offset some of those expenses between 20.
City Administrator, would you have at hand what the balance will be of the IFEDA Fund 208 after removing the $225?
I have a report in front of me that the finance officer prepared, and I think it was mid-month in September. It might have been month end, but the amount in the EDA Fund 208 is $236,849.84. The balance in the general fund at the same time was $2,271,558. And our policy is that we maintain 50% of our general fund budgeted expenditures as a fund balance to carry us for the first subsequent year. So at the end of the year, this year, we need to have 50% of our total general fund expenditures, which is about $5.6 million. I'm using that.
2.3 million approximately. No, 2.
Approximately, and we are subject to receiving significant revenues in December again, because we're going to receive our second half property tax payment from the state of Minnesota, and also receive our second half local government aid payment. From the stream coming into.
And actually, our LGA is 4 million, so we'll get 2 million in December. And our levy is 2.5 million, and that'll be 1.25 million. So when you add 2 million to 1.25 million, you get 3.25 million. And when you put that at the end of December, that's more than 50% of that's more than 50% of 5.6, which is really 2.8, which means we have plenty of money in the general fund.
We'll need it for 6 months because we won't have any money coming in until June.
Well,
We can address this
Yes,
at a later date.
if necessary.
okay.
Further discussion? Question?
No.
And I would vote yes. There being 3 for the resolution and 1 opposed, the resolution is approved or is carried, and the transfer is approved. Thank you. Item number 7 is consider the Community Design Group proposal to update the draft comprehensive plan, land use regulations, and subdivision ordinance in the spring of 2019 for an estimated additional fee of up to $15,000. City Administrator.
Mr. Mayor, Council, we received a proposal which is included in your packet from the Community Design Group. And I've had some conversations with Antonio, who's the president of the company, and he's indicated in order to provide some additional services to complete the comprehensive plan and rewrite of our zoning ordinance, which is our land use regulations, and our subdivision ordinance. We have drafts of all 3 documents, but we've suggested that we want to include recommendations that are coming out of the housing study that's been done for Coochin County, and we expect to have that finalized, as Councilor Jackson pointed out, sometime by the end of this month. So we want to include those recommendations into the housing section of the comprehensive plan. In addition to that, we want to try and include some conceptual mapping for future trails and sidewalk improvements that were proposed as part of the Safe Routes to School plan that was done 1.5 or 2 years ago by a committee. And thirdly, we want to include some more updated mapping for showing the areas that the councils move forward for annexation, and also identify some policies for how we would go about orderly annexation in the future if there's additional real estate that would be potentially annexed. And that's what the comprehensive plan is. It's really a future document to guide future development in the community. And so the design group is actually in a deficit situation for the work they were doing. And they're proposing or estimating that a cost of between $12,000 and $15,000 would be necessary to add those additional elements into the plan. The cost would be determined by how many community engagement meetings they had between now and the time that we actually adopt it. So if we have minimal meetings, the cost would be less. If we max it out, they're saying the cost would be probably not to exceed $15,000. So we're asking to get the council's authorization to approve an amendment to allow an additional fee of up to $15,000 to do the work that I outlined. That into the professional services line item, which is us over the course of the last.
Thank you. Council's pleasure then with motion by Councillor Jacksaw. Second by Councillor Briggs. Discussion on the motion or the plan to complete the comprehensive plan and the land use regulations.
I congratulate this council for undertaking the comprehensive land use plan under the direction of the mayor. I think it was the right thing to do. I think we need to finish it, and I think we need to complete it, and we're going to have to spend the money. I would say that I don't want, and we need some public meetings, but we had public meetings during the process of creating the plan, so a minimal amount of meetings I think are really necessary there. You have to have some, but I'd like to have a discussion with them on what we need there.
I think that's very reasonable. I'd also like to say that I think including the housing plan, which you have been a great proponent of, will also be helpful as part of that comprehensive plan.
By ignoring the housing plan in this plan would be I believe that would be a mistake. So I think this is wise.
And the trail piece of it is also important. Yeah.
Very good. No further discussion? Question?
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried, and approval is given for administration to move forward with the community design group on the comprehensive plan and land use regulations. Thank you. Item number 8 under new business is to set the canvassing board meeting for the elections at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, November 13, 2018. That would be prior to the committee of the whole meeting of the council. Your pleasure with that. Work for everybody's schedule? Okay, motion by Councillor Kraus.
Second.
Second by Councillor Jacksaw. Discussion on the motion or the setting of the meeting? Question?
Aye.
I would vote yes. Motion is carried. Canvassing board meeting is established for 2 p.m. on Tuesday, November the 13th. Thank you. Item number 9 is a new item, and that's a resolution approving the increase in fees for the ambulance services. I know that Councillor Briggs and Councillor Kraus were not available for the meeting with the consultant on Wednesday, October the 31st, and also we just received the executive summary of the meeting from the consultant this afternoon. I have not had a chance to read it myself. I know we'd like to move forward with the increase in fees as soon as possible to help alleviate the challenges that the ambulance is facing with regard to cash flow, but I think it might be wise to give us a couple more weeks to really review this, make sure that we're going in the right direction. Councillor Jackson.
You don't know if we need an ordinance yet at this point anyway, right?
Well, my understanding, and I was going to research the city charter as well as the code of ordinances to get a firm answer on that, but my recollection and my understanding is that once we have an ordinance in place, that the charter or the code of ordinances allows us to make changes to fees. I don't have a resolution drafted to do that, and I wasn't done examining that. Again, as you know, I put this on the agenda really at your request on Friday, so one of the things that we did get is the executive summary that you have before you. I received that, I think it was late this morning. I perused it, had a couple questions, and the consultant sent it back with some rewording to try and clarify things where I had questions. And essentially the billing recommendations or recommended modifications are on page 8 if you want to look at that. There's 2 tables at the bottom of the page, and it shows in fairly short, brief fashion the type of charges that we have on the left column, what our current charges are towards the middle column, what the proposed increase in rates would be for instance, for a basic life support base rate versus an advanced life support rate. And then it actually shows a comparison in the far right column with what the Virginia Fire Department and EMS service has relative to what our new rates would be. And you can see that we're very much in line with what Virginia has currently, and we're probably 102 miles further than Virginia is from regional hospitals like those in Duluth. The scope of reasonableness with the bottom graph shows what those total rate increases would net if there weren't any other changes, meaning that we had the same number of billable runs in a year, which I think was the same in 17, which was 1,318. It shows that our base rate increase would result in about $180,000 in total or new revenues, and it's itemized there, so the total increase would be about $303,000. And our deficit, I think, for 2017 was about $262,000. So deficit slightly exceeded, but over time costs go up.
Well, it wouldn't wipe out the deficit we have, though.
That's probably correct.
That's why there's a certain amount of urgency here.
And I'm wondering if we might not, for Councillor Kraus and Councillor Briggs, have a short discussion at our Committee of the Whole meeting on November 13th, which is prior to the November 19 regular City Council meeting. Just to be sure, if you read the executive summary and you have questions with regard to where we're
I've
going.
been engaged all along with this. So
Yeah, you have been as a committee person with Councillor Jackson.
May I add, I did have an opportunity to exchange emails with Mr. Metro. I was, of course, out of town and unable to attend the meeting, but I have an issue with raising the rates, and the only reason I say that is and it clearly even states it in the report. Medicaid is going to pay what Medicaid is going to pay. So if we raise our rates, we're raising our rates for people that have commercial insurance. Their deductible is their deductible. Commercial insurance will pay what commercial insurance will pay. So ultimately, they're going to be paying out of pocket for this increase. The rate increase is going to come out of the pocket of the commercial insurance people only.
Yes.
And I feel that that's a difficult pill.
Yeah, Medicare and Medicaid are going to pay what they pay.
They're going to pay what they're going to pay, and they're already paying their maximum. We're already getting our maximum rate from them. So for us to raise rates, it's the commercial insurance policies that are going to have to pay it, and they're going to pay what they're going to pay, and ultimately it's going to come out of the pocket of people with commercial insurance.
Not entirely true. The program that the state has started reimburses our ambulance service 65% of the shortfall between what Medicare, Medicaid pays and our bill. They're doing that now. We collected $30,000 during this year. So we are foregoing revenue there because our billing rate isn't high enough. Secondly, I agree with you, but I'm going to cry tears much more harder over our city taxpayers than I am for the insurance companies, because I'm telling you that with the deficits in the ambulance fund, city taxpayers, property taxpayers are on the hook for that. So if we don't fix this,
There's one thing to remember, that we're fairly new into this game. And for a long time, our rates were really low. Way too low. That's why we ended up getting into the situation and hiring Mr. Metro to look at this, is because nobody in the ambulance department has the expertise to really figure this out. And if you really look at Virginia's rates, you see that we're not going to be out of line. If you want the ambulance fund to basically fund itself without taxpayer help, that's the only way we're going to get around it. It's inevitable.
so far, none of the levy has gone into the ambulance service.
We haven't had to subsidize it at this point, but we do have a deficit.
I mean, none of us want to, you know.
And we had good conversations. It's just in my private sector job, I deal with this constantly. So I had some questions, and he was able to answer. And the numbers, but I'll be honest, the numbers scare me a little bit, because I just feel that the burden is going to fall on, according to the runs, a very small number that you're going to be able to extract more money. And and you're right, I have very little sympathy for the insurance companies, but on the same token, deductibles are what deductibles are.
Unfortunate situation, but that's just the way the industry goes. I mean, if you really listen to some of the CEOs, some of these ambulance funds, whether it's a helicopter, a fixed wing, or an ambulance, that's the way it is, period. Commercial payers are the ones doing it because our government hasn't fixed the Medicare, Medicaid situations.
And transportation.
Healthcare in general.
Healthcare in general. I mean, we deal with the same thing at the hospital, Bob. As a hospital board, we deal with the same situations.
And Mike Metro said that our city isn't alone, that this is a nationwide problem with the ambulance service. So, I think we've been under Adam Manas's advice and the human resource.
And one thing I will add is in October, in October we had a meeting with some officials from medical assistance from MA and some people from Medicaid for, again, my private sector piece, but they did say that they're working to align with, so as these rates go up, they will see what commercial policies are doing, and they are working. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I just hear that it's disproportionate, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Very good. It's the council's pleasure. Do you want to refer it to the next meeting or table it to the next meeting, or?
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Harley was there, so he's well aware. He was at the meeting. Brian's been following this for months. You and Joe, you're late to the table here, but you just came to the table. My concern is the longer we wait, the bigger that hole gets.
I'm confident with the conversations that I think
ready to move ahead with it.
Yeah.
We've been discussing it in HR committee for a long time.
Chief, we're on the item with regard to increasing the fees on the ambulance service. We don't have a motion yet, but discussing whether or not we should hold off several weeks to have a committee of the whole meeting and have any further discussion. Any thoughts that you might have as a leader of that department?
For the most part, the study came with some good results, I believe. There was one facet of the billing changes that we might have in front of me, so I don't know the number of the line. Miller did say it was possible and able to.
Well, the other services aren't charging that long distance rate?
Other services are, just none that he bills for.
I see.
Responsible for about 100 services. Possible, it is doable.
So it's a logistic thing. If we pass the resolution, it's not going to be something we have to come back and change.
We might be, okay. I guess I'm just a little uncertain at this point myself. I would like to hold off 2 weeks. I'd like to just have a little bit more information with regard to the charging of that, and if we didn't charge for that, what would that do to our rates overall? Because I don't think it's that large an item, but at the same time, I don't want to get it out there and then have insurance companies not willing to pay it, and then that also would end up something that the user would have to pay for.
Again, I don't have the document in front of me. I can't recall off the top of my head what. I believe the next council meeting is still in November. Until the next council meeting.
Okay, well, then we could still go ahead on December 1st. I was thinking if it was an ordinance, it would take at least 2 council meetings.
Well,
Yeah, I can wait.
I guess I missed that part of the conversation.
Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about that.
Because it'd be nice to
that's the other thing that we
clean
need
that issue that you're worried about. Let's make sure.
Chief Manassa, do you believe that that information could be ironed out 2 Mondays from now?
Yes.
I move that we table this to the next meeting.
Motion by Councilor Kraus to table to the November 19 meeting.
I'm not going to second it, but. Brian, did you?
Second by Councilor Briggs. Question?
Mayor?
Please.
I might suggest, to follow through with what the council was suggesting before, is that at the meeting on November 13th, we reserve this to see if there's any questions, and I might suggest that I can see if Mr. Metro would be available. We can get him on a conference call and respond to any questions that any of the individual councilors have regarding his executive summary, because I know that was just provided today and you haven't had an opportunity to review it in depth. It appears that the long-distance transport number, which would be an average of $649 per transport, would equate to a $35,046 revenue stream over the course of a year. So, but again, as Councilor Jackson pointed out, we do have a deficit in our ambulance fund, and so this recommendation was to go forward with all these rate changes as we were looking at the total and the impacts it would have on our long-term fiscal health, as well as the operations and reimbursement through our.
Right now, our deficit is $500,000.
That's correct.
Over 500,000 over the course of, well, on an average, divide 24 into 500,000.
Do we know that it's actually 500,000 deficit, or is it a cash flow issue?
No, it's a negative fund balance.
We've got outstanding claims.
The number at the September date was $515,716.43 deficit, but there's some receivables that are applied to that, but that's the point that goes to what Councilor Kraus was concerned about, is that it seems that the commercial payers are going to have a disproportionate share of having to pay those increased fees because Medicare and Medicaid are both fixed fee payments. And the example was if we bill out at $1,250, I think the reimbursement that we would get was one was 43% of that amount, the other was 34% of that amount, which doesn't problem with the system. And as Councilor Jackson pointed out, it's not just International Falls, it's a nationwide system.
And I will say this, it isn't a cash flow timing thing either, because if you go to the end of 2016, the last time that our fund balance was above zero, it's gone downhill every month since then. So it's not timing, it's real. Mm-hmm. We got a $516,000 cash deficit that this rate increase isn't going to wipe out. I mean, this is just to take care of forthcoming costs. So I don't know how we're going to pay that $516,000 back, frankly. But
I thought you had said that it was about $230,000 for this year.
I think it was $2,000, so it's $40,000 rougher, plus or minus. It could be a positive revenue that could be applied to the deficit over time.
I just like to get more information on the $649 average transport for long distance. Get a better understanding of that also.
I think if you look at number 14 in his narrative on that report, or actually it's number 15, I think, is the discussion on how that works and the rationale for it. So you can maybe make mental note to look at that.
We will do that. Further discussion with regard to the motion then to table the item number 9 of new business to the November 19, 2018 meeting of the City Council? Hearing none, question.
Aye.
I will vote yes. Motion is carried. Item is tabled. Thank you. Any other new business? Now we'll move to reports of boards, committees, and department heads. City Administrator.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow's election day, and we hope that everybody will vote. And of course, there's a reminder that there's a sales and use tax question on the ballot. So we're just reminding and encouraging people to vote tomorrow. And we've got polling places set up and posted. They'll be ready tomorrow morning, and the polls are open at 7 a.m. and they close at 8.
And could I add to that? The East Ward polling place has been moved, so it's a new polling place.
Yes, it's at Evangelical Covenant Church on 17th and
2nd Avenue East.
2nd Avenue East.
Further.
I have nothing else.
Thank you. City Attorney, please.
I have nothing special to report, Mayor.
Thank you. Chief Maston, please.
I have no report this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Chief Manassa.
Thank you, Mayor. For the month of October, in the fire department, we did have 6 fire department call-outs. 5 of those were city responses, with 2 commercial fire alarms and 3 CO alarms. 1 rural response that ended up being a response by myself only. It was a after action more so than anything on a very lucky homeowner. Very informative incident there. We had our monthly fire meeting on the 11th with a relief meeting following, and we did search and rescue training in an environment for our firefighters. The ambulance for the month of October, we had 95 911 calls, 43 transfers for a total of 138 runs, which compared to 2017 is about 20 higher from 118. That brings our totals up for the year of 736 911 calls, 455 transfers, and 1,191 total runs. I think one thing that should be noted when I give you guys these monthly reports, this was something that we discussed in the Metro study. These are our total call volumes, what we get called for. These are not billable runs. So there is sometimes a discrepancy in those runs, and that's something that got pointed out in the study, which I guess I knew and probably didn't do a good job of educating on, but those are our total call-outs for clarity. Monthly meeting and training was on the 10th with a regular business meeting, and we did have training. And again, because we're talking about it, we did meet with Mr. Metro. He was in town last week. We spent a lot of time together, myself and Mr. Metro, and we set up some very valuable meetings within the community. I think we're getting a lot of good results for the money spent on the study, and I think a lot of good insight on things we can do to remedy some situations we have in the ambulance. The good outside look, it's always good to have that outside eye looking in, and again, Mr. Metro is very knowledgeable of ambulance services, not just in Minnesota, but with a nationwide perspective. So again, I guess I'd like to say thank you to the council for allowing that to happen, because I think this is exactly what we needed. Again, we spent a little bit of money, but I think this is going to gain us in the long run. So thank you for that, and hopefully we can implement some changes that come out of the study and the report.
Thank you for the recommendation and for the committee's recommendation in bringing forth that consultant. He certainly comes with great credentials and really enjoyed his presentation on Wednesday. I thought it was very, very well done. I guess maybe back to your point with regard to billable runs, discussion that was also part of the meeting with regard to folks who are diabetic or have a diabetic issue. Some of those runs are billable or some are not, or can you give us a little bit, 1 minute on that one, please?
Correct. So the background on that is we do a certain amount of runs. I think last year it was right around, well, I think it was 238 runs off the top of my head that were non-billable runs. So we got called and either canceled en route, treated but did not transport, or was no affliction, I guess, so to speak, or no patient, so to speak. There's a certain amount of those runs, and I used the example with the mayor and Ken earlier. This is just one small example, but diabetics are a great example. Before we had paramedics, we would always transport. With the advent of paramedics, we can treat in the field and do not require a transport out of that. We can, I guess in layman's terms, we can fix them for the short term and not require an ambulance transportation. As of right now, we don't charge for those runs, and that was one of the recommendations that came out of the study, is having a lower treat, no transport rate. So we're using supplies, we're using resources, we should get a little bit for that. Along with that, to get a little bit more in depth, was the suggestion was having certain criteria to go along with that, which we haven't hammered out yet. We need to get that figured out, but overly simplified, if we do a treatment, if we use medication, if we do a valid assessment, that's something we can treat for. If we get called and there's no patient, obviously we're not going to treat. If it's lack of a better term, Joe Public calls for somebody else and the patient or the potential patient is not injured, or there is no reason for an ambulance, that's something we won't charge for. So there is going to have to be some criteria in place for that. We're not going to recoup all 238 for the sake of the conversation, but we can recoup on some of that. So at least cover our possible expenses out the door, so to speak.
Very helpful, thank you. Further questions or?
One of the things I'd like to highlight from that Mike Metro pointed out is that our ambulance service is part of a three-legged stool in the regional medical service area, which would include Duluth and Bemidji. And that without us, they wouldn't have our patients in Duluth or Bemidji, you know.
Or to the Twin Cities or Rochester, because we've made those trips on long-distance transfers.
I think another point that's worth bringing up in a public forum is when we raise rates, it's always a scary thing for the public, and I think it's important to note that this generally does not affect people individually. This is really something that will affect the insurance companies. Medicare pays what they pay, so I think we want the public to know that if we're on a fixed income or certain situations, that this is not going to hit the pocketbook directly. This is something that does help us maintain our service level and helps us supply that service that reaches the community. It's a way for us to sustain that.
Point it out, thank you. Further questions?
Mayor.
City Administrator, please.
One point as part of this conversation that perhaps could have been stated earlier is that Mr. Metro provided this executive summary for us to have this conversation about the fee side of things, but he's going to complete a complete analysis and report to the council, and we're anticipating as part of his proposal that was submitted that we'll have that information on December 12th, and then that would be prior to the City Council's last meeting, where we can have some more conversation about other recommendations that might come out of his report. As soon as he noted that was an aggressive schedule, but when we get it, we'll make sure that the council. The other point I just wanted to ask the chief, I noticed that he talked about responding to a heater fire. Was that a space heater? And do you have any suggestions or recommendations for people temperatures going down and just trying to promote safety? What kind of recommendations?
That is a very good point. That was a space heater used in a 3-season porch. I didn't see anything wrong with the way the heater was set up as far as, I don't believe it was operator error of any kind. It was one of those I'm going to call it a freak accident, but there's always things to be worried about with space heaters, and of course where you put them, adjacent to walls, how they're plugged in. Want to make sure they're in a grounded outlet. One thing we do see that was not the case of this fire is extension cords, stuff of that issue, overloading a circuit. This was a very good scenario for the homeowners. I think they got a little bit of a scare, but this could have been much, much worse, and they were very lucky. They acted fast and appropriately, and they did a good job. And again, with space heaters, any equipment over time and use, they do degrade a little bit. One thing we do get from the fire side that we're very lucky to get is the State Fire Marshal's office always puts out a recall list every month. Even brand new items wind up on the recall list for various items, and just about on every list there's a brand of or a model of space heater that winds up on the recall list. So that's something very important to keep an eye on when we're using those kind of items.
Did they have a fire extinguisher they used? Or?
They did. They had smoke alarms in their house that alerted them of the fire, and they had a fire extinguisher handy, and that's how they took care of the situation. And again, they were very lucky. Their 3-season porch was very nicely done on the inside with tongue and groove cedar, which did catch fire. Substantial damage on the wall, but again, it could have been a lot worse. So they were very lucky.
I have 2 space heaters in my mother's garage. I'm going to have to look at your recall list.
Well, and I would just reiterate the chief's point. Do not use extension cords with space heaters.
And the newer ones are all, I think all of them anyway, the newer ones have tip-over protection. You get into the older ones, a lot of them don't have the tip-over protection, so if you do knock them over, they will stay hot, and that's a downside too. So always want to modernize and stay on top of it. So.
Thank you. Great report. Thank you. Move to the reports of the mayor, council committees, boards, and commissions. Any committees to report at this time?
I just want to make a comment. I see all our candidates are here tonight, all of them, right, for the city council. You're not a candidate. Well, you are a candidate at this point. Anyway, you've been here faithfully, all of you. Good luck to every one of you. I'm sure you'll all be relieved tomorrow when it's over. Congratulations for putting your name out there and running. It takes some courage to do, I think. Yeah.
On Mayor's report, I would apologize to Councillor Kraus for not naming him as attending the candidate forum, which he did. I'm used to having Councillor Kraus as part of the City Council. So, and I also want to take and thank Dwayne for allowing Councillor Droba and I to do the community radio show with regard to the local sales and use tax. That was very well done. And we'll know the answer tomorrow with regard to that issue. Further under council committees, boards, and commissions. Not anyone in the audience that wishes to approach the council at this time? Not, the next regular city council meeting is on November 19th, and the city offices are closed on November the 12th for Veterans Day.
That's correct.
And on Thursday, November 22nd and 23rd for Thanksgiving holidays. And if you read the CVB, Convention Visitors Bureau minutes, just want to note in there that the director of the Convention Visitors Bureau, Peter Schultz, will be taking his 3rd term as the president of the Minnesota Arrowhead Association, and it's very cool that he's having his 3rd term on that. So obviously a great deal of folks like the work that Pete is doing. With that, if there's nothing further to come before the council at this time, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.